in the context of a changed environment and a quickly changing environment, how does your sales conversation go? What preparation do you need, and what continuing relationship do you need after that? So let's talk about sales enablement now, how to prepare for the deal-making process with a man who over the past 30 years has become one of this industry's most effective communicators. Please welcome to the stage and give him a big round of applause, Mr. John Alison.
No pressure there then, Nick.
With the naughty boys at the back of the class.
I know. It's a late entry.
Good man.
And for those of you who are expecting to hear about cybersecurity, I think that's coming later. What we're going to do today is to talk about sales enablement and how that's starting to help your sales people have a conversation with your customers. And to do that, we need to think in terms of how you're going to keep ahead and stay ahead of your competition in this fast-changing world and environment in which we live. To actually enable your sales teams, you're going to have to face three fairly major challenges. The first challenge that you're going to have to be facing is how you remain relevant to your customers, and I think we've heard a lot about that already this morning. The second major challenge you're going to have to think about is how your sales teams cope with buyers who are better informed than ever before. The third thing you're going to have to really focus your time on is how you equip your whole sales team to have a conversation that shows your customers that they understand the challenges they're facing today, but also the challenges they're facing and potentially facing in the future. I'm John Alison, Managing Director of Enable Sales Academy, and I'm thrilled to be here, even though we sort of changed the timings a little bit, just to share some experience I've gained over the last few years working within a PLC environment. Responsible for training and development of over 2,000 salespeople. One of the biggest single things that fascinates me is how businesses fail to keep remaining relevant to their customers. And one of my favorite stories, which is a bit of a legend story, is that of Blockbuster Video. So who remembers hiring a video in the late 90s, early 2000s from Blockbuster? Yeah. Or maybe a DVD, perhaps, if you were a late entry. They lost complete track of what was happening, and there's a gentleman who actually came into a store one day and hired Apollo 13. In the year 2000, Blockbuster were very proud of the fact that they just charged their customers $800 million in late fees for bringing those videos and DVDs back late. Reed Hastings, the chap in the top left there, was one of those such customers. Name might not mean a lot to a lot of people, however, Reed Hastings was a gentleman who really did what Blockbuster should have done. He started to focus his time on how he could improve customer service. Did he really want to get up in the middle of the evening, beckoned by his partner to go and rent out a DVD and then stand in a queue and maybe even find that the DVD or video he wanted to hire wasn't actually available because somebody else had got there first? He founded Netflix. And the rest, as they say, is history. So realistically, what you should be focusing on, as the previous speaker was talking about, is how you start to keep relevant to your customers in this fast-changing environment. And the sort of levels of disruption that we're already seeing in business today is not going to stop accelerating. If we just look at the changing shape of the top 10 businesses worldwide, 2006 to 2016, you'll see quite a difference in shape. If we start thinking that banks are being replaced by wealth management companies and oil and gas companies are being replaced by technology companies who are focusing on data communications. So for me, I mean, is that sort of informing us that the new fuel of the economy is data and technology? I kind of guess you're right. So when we start to think in terms of what we need to do to start to focus our time on this, we not only need to start to delve into the life cycle and people that we're dealing with today, but we also need to focus on what the challenges are going to be in the future. In short, we're going to have to really take a deep dive into their world. We need to become experts in their market. We need to think in terms of what challenges they're facing today, but also the challenges they're going to face in the future, and what kind of relationship they want with us. We also have to ensure that the conversation we're having with those customers is consistent across our sales teams, and that is a challenge in itself. How can you convince them that your solution is going to solve those challenges? And Henry Ford had it about right. You know, if he'd have asked his potential customers back in the day, what do you want to solve your transport challenges? What issues are you facing? They might have said, I need to get to work faster. So his answer could have been, hey, get up a bit earlier, you know? So when you start to think in terms of how you're addressing people's challenges, you've really got to think to the side sometimes. Sales enablement step 1 is do a deep dive. Immerse yourselves in your customers' marketplaces. Start to invest in some serious research into what's affecting them today and what's going to affect them in the future, and how you start to ramp up your sales teams to actually use that knowledge and have a consistent conversation with the customers. Those of you who've heard of the Challenger sale, has anybody bought the Challenger book, launched by CEB Gartner, or Gartner as they're now called, in 2011? When they originally launched that book, and it's worth a read by the way, when they originally launched that book in 2011, they were talking about 5.4 people on average being involved in the decision-making process. They've just redone that research. They're now looking at 6.8 people on average being involved in the decision-making process. Now, I don't know what you guys are like at herding cats, but you can imagine corralling all of those decision makers together to try and get them to have consensus to what they actually really want to solve in the first place, let alone what the best solution is to solve it, is a neat trick. Trying to then enable your sales teams to have the right conversations with your people, to help those people navigate through those choices, is another thing entirely. And how are your marketing team helping with that conversation and thought process? Are the marketeers that you work with you actually leading to your solution and helping your customers think about that before they engage? And we heard a little bit about technology and people doing research. The same book shows us that 57% of the decision-making process is made before people engage with a potential supplier. So if we start to think in terms of that, those marketing messages have to be pretty spot on, because that's what you're relying on to drag people in, to help somebody talk to them about their solution, or the solution that's going to best fit for them. Your customers are better informed than ever before. We need to make sure that your sales teams have got the right skills, knowledge, to actually have the right conversation with your customers. And if they're not all consistent and they're not all singing from the same hymn sheet, then you've got a problem. It's no huge surprise to me that these are the top companies worldwide in terms of amount of money they invest every year in R&D. And if for those of you who've got great memories from a slide a bit earlier on, 5 of the top 10 are on that list. The big surprise to me was Apple's being outstripped now by Samsung on investment. So that's straight out of Forbes, so lifted off the internet the other day. When you start to think in terms of where we're going to put that investment in and who's going to do it, and once we've got that information, how are we actually going to get access to it to our sales teams to inform how they go to market and how they sell? Your customers are very choosy. You know, how do they want to buy? Do they want a purely transactional relationship with you? Or do they want somebody who's going to manage their account? Do they want somebody who's actually going to spend time with them and help them along the way in the process? And who's going to have those conversations? Starting to map your buyer's journey is a worthy thing to do, and it starts to inform you as to how you're going to drive your business forward and how you're going to interact with your customers. Turning that research into something you can use for your sales teams is absolutely essential. So you start to plot your buying journey, and then you start to develop your sales process and your sales methodologies on the back of that. We need to start to think about how your marketing literature is turned into sales collateral that's going to help your sales teams along the journey and help them have a conversation with your customer that prompts decision making. We need to be thinking in terms of everything geared towards your customer's buying journey and making sure that your sales teams know exactly what it is they should be saying at that particular time. Look at every single touch point where you engage with your customers. What does great look like? What are your top performers doing? Start to dial that into the process. If it's working for them, it's working for a reason, and that's generally revolving around a conversation. It's not such a silly idea to start to think in terms of using technology to actually prompt those conversations, and CRM in its own right is proving very successful for a lot of companies. However, it's a £40 billion business on its own right, forecasted to be by the end of this year. Now, if you start to think in terms of 47% adoption rates, some businesses are as high as 90%, some as low as 25%, but if on average it's 47% adoption rates, that's a fairly substantial amount of money, eye-wateringly large amount of money that's wasted. So how are you going to get your people using it? The weird thing is, the more you've aligned it to the customer's buying process, in the salesperson's eyes, what's not to like? If it's going to help improve the relationship with your customer, what's not to like? People will start to think in terms of using it. If you're purely going to put a CRM system in play to judge your salesperson's activity, it will not work for you. You need to have a really good, long, hard think, get your 6.8 decision makers together in a room and think about what it is you want to use it for. And then you can start to dial in all of the clever stuff. And there is some really great clever stuff. In fact, there's a gentleman at the back of the room who did a presentation for us the other day on how you start to judge people's sales activity. Really innovative stuff. When you start to think in terms of how you can start to turn your sales and marketing literature into sales collateral that you can use, you can start to make playbooks. We spoke about touch points. We talk about buying process. Every stage of that buying process has a cycle, has a conversation that needs to take place, has a prompting thought process that needs to take place with your customers. If you manage to script it right and do the correct sort of terminologies and everything, you can dial in all of your right product literature, all of the prompting conversations, hints and tips, live in the moment, there for your salesperson to see. They can use it as they're speaking to a customer or pre-speaking to a customer to prompt thought and get the preparation right. You can do a little video of your top performer talking about what they do at that particular stage in the process and dial that into it as well. So it's relevant, it's real, and it helps your customers along the way. And it shows your customers that your sales teams understand their world and their challenges. Data. I was at a Salesforce conference a few months ago, and they were talking about using Watson IBM big data and dialing it into their new Einstein system within Salesforce.com. Incredible. They showed a video clip and information live in the moment to what was happening to weather patterns in the States, and a text message that was sent straight to the customers of that insurance company to say, hey, batten down the hatches, there's a storm coming your way. That's actively helping the customer, but it's also helping them save money on insurance claims. Big data, live in the moment, happening right now. However, algorithms replacing somebody making a pricing decision. Anecdotally, you're looking at fairly substantial increases in margin to do that. But if your customers want purely a transactional relationship with you, that's what's going to happen. The whole thing is around how you create value for your customers. Everybody heard of Neil Rackham, author of Spin Selling? Some of you will have read his book. I recommend it. It's still very relevant. What Neil was saying is a customer gives you as a gift, if you like, the relationship based on the value you create. He's absolutely right. If your salespeople are creating no value because your customer wants a transactional relationship with you, that's what you have to give them. You have to make sure the service is spot on, give them the transactional relationship. If you want to create value for your customers, now we're talking. I attended another conference, and not that I spend my whole life at conferences, but I went to see a conference run by a company called Seagos. There was a gentleman by the name of Gert Leonard, thank you very much, speaking. And he was talking about technology versus humanity, so it's quite relevant to the previous speaker. absolutely right. You know, anything that can be replaced by automation will be. And if your salespeople aren't adding any value and your customers want the transaction relationship, then that's the way it's going to head. We also need to bear in mind that actually machines currently don't have emotional intelligence. They do not do those basic social skills. This is a schematic of jobs they believe will be obsolete in the next 10 years or so. The scary thing is the top 5, out of the top 5, 3 of them are sales-related jobs. Now, if you start to think in terms of those transactional relationships your customers want, what are your sales teams going to be doing? How are you prompting the conversation? You have to gear up to that. The great news is, currently, machines, oh, here we go, it ain't working again, here we go. The great news is that machines don't do all of that. Now, if you have a quick look at those words that describe people and what people bring to the party, that emotional intelligence, that ability to craft a compelling story, your people being able to negotiate and be really creative in the way that they design a solution, those are very, very human skills. And if you're dealing with your customers in a way that proves that you're solving their challenges and having great conversations with your people based on those social skills, that's what we're going to be having, and that's what the map's going to look like. Anything that can be replaced by technology will be replaced by technology. So if you gear up to find your top performers and find exactly what they do at the right stage in this customer's buying process, that's what you start to mirror, and that's what's going to drive your conversation. I'm going to go on to the next slide now. Let's see if that works. Yes. The big thing for me is retention of staff, especially good ones. And there's a lot of stories going around about millennials and how long they stay or don't stay in an organization. I don't buy into that particularly. I do buy into the fact that if you as an employer do not give a proper development pathway and do not reward and recognize your team's high performance, then they're definitely going to leave. If there's nothing in it for them, why stay? If they can find a much better position somewhere else where it's going to challenge them and give them the reward and recognition they believe they deserve, they're going to head off. So start to think in terms of how you can start to develop your people. Think in terms of giving them the right skills, tools and knowledge to drive things forward. And think about what you're measuring. Dial in your reward and recognition packages to performance. Make sure you're measuring the right things within your CRM system, and don't just look in 20/20 hindsight. Look at what's happening as well as what's happened. A bit of a brave statement from an idiot like me who stands up and does sales training for a living these days. Sales training on its own is only effective for a short period of time. What you need to do is a lot of other stuff to back it up. It's called a blended learning approach. If you back that up with performance coaching from your management teams, you're starting to get into a winning combo. So if you train them and coach them, you're liable to get a fairly sustained increase in performance. If you train them, coach them, and dial all of the stuff that we've just been speaking about, your sales playbooks, your discussions, right the way through that sales process, learning in the moment with all the right product information dialed in, you're going to start to see performance improvement. And furthermore, you're going to see your new employees coming in and being high performers much quicker. The Americans call it ramped up performance. That's exactly what you get. You get ramped up performance much quicker if you train them as they go and learn in the job. Typically 70-20-10, so 70% of all learning in the workplace. If you're doing that through technology, brilliant, congratulations. So just a bit of a recap. Sales enablement driving the sales conversation. Start at the beginning. Start with the customer's buying journey. Map out your sales methodology from that, and that means how you go to market, how you deal with your customers. Then start to think in terms of what your high performers are doing right now. Mirror it, bottle it, video it, talk about it, get them talking about it, get them to be your positive advocates. Then we can start thinking about your sales tools. What are you going to bolt into your CRM systems? How are you going to make it work for you? We can then get into the training element, using all of the marketing literature and turning it into proper sales collateral that works for you and your customers. That's it from me. If happy to take any questions, any...
And a round of applause because I heard that was super, wasn't it? Very good indeed. Yeah. Any questions?
Questions? No? That got me off the hook nicely.
Let's have
Happy to answer any questions as anybody picks me up during the day.
I've got a question.
Yes, please.
That was really helpful, thank you.
Hold on for a sec, there's a mic coming to you. It's there.
I'm curious about this phrase playbook, which I hear a lot more frequently.
Yeah.
Just elaborate a bit more on what you believe to be a playbook. What is in the playbook?
A playbook. Okay, so think of a particular piece of your customer's buying journey. So your customers may be looking for information about a particular issue they've got. Playbook really starts with your marketing collateral. So currently people just say, here are all my bells and whistles and here are all my solutions. Playbooks start to challenge that thought. So you can start to think about, at that stage in the customer's buying journey, your salespeople really ought to be thinking in terms of asking these types of questions, because these are the types of challenges our marketing teams believe they're facing right now. And this information might be helpful to them as well, and it's all there for them. So it's like a playbook, it's like by numbers. So people can dive into it or not, as the case may be, depending on how well they're performing.
So it sounds like it's a convenient, easy-to-use document for salespeople that
Yeah.
is aligned to the customer's buying journey.
Absolutely, and also it'll give you your management tools as well. So what should your managers be looking for to say, hey chap, let's pull you back here a sec. What happened there? Let's just talk through that for a second. How do you think we can change that the next time? And here's some stuff to maybe read before you make the next call. So it's that sort of painting by numbers, if you like, but in a salesy environment. Because let's face it, if people are leaving a lot, you've got a limited window to get your people performing quickly. And if you start to think in terms of how much it costs you to replace an employee, we reckoned one of our external sales guys, typically on 35 grand, costs us about 120,000 to replace them. So by the time you've procrastinated about who you change and 3 months notice periods, all that kind of malarkey, you lost revenue, it's big. Anything else
question?
I can help with? Brilliant, okay, thanks very much.
Thank you very much, John Alison. Superb.